Saudi Arabia. I will start with a quick round of introduction. My name is Nelson Kipiergo Koech.
I, Mohammed Ruwange, do swear that the information I shall give before this Departmental Committee on Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations on the matter under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Just to let you know that conforms with our standing order. Article 124A of the Constitution provides that when a House of Parliament considers any appointment for which its approval is required, under the Constitution and an Act of Parliament, the appointment shall be considered by a committee of the relevant House. The Departmental Committee on Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations is established pursuant to Article 124, sub-Article 1 of the Constitution and National Standing Order 216. The National Assembly Standing Order 216 spells out the mandate of the departmental committees, which includes to vet and report all appointments where the Constitution or any law requires the National Assembly to approve. Further, the second schedule of the Standing Order allocates the committee, among others, to oversight foreign relations, diplomatic and consular services, and international relations. The purpose of this suitability, Mr. Mohammed Ruwange is our ambassador nominee to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I'll ask you a few procedural questions before I allow you space to give us a brief history of yourself. Have you complied with tax obligations to the state?
I have.
Have you complied with clearance from the Director of Criminal Investigation?
I have.
Have you complied with clearance from the Office of Registrar of Political Parties?
I have.
Have you complied with clearance from Higher Education Loans Board?
I have.
Have you complied with clearance from ESCC?
I have.
Have you been charged in a court of law convicted?
No, I have.
Have you been charged in a court of, have you been adversely mentioned in an investigatory or parliamentary report?
Not at all.
Do you hold dual citizenship?
No, I don't.
Your financial net worth?
71 million Kenyan shillings.
Excellent. So I'll give you 10 or less minutes to introduce family, to acknowledge the people who accompanied you, to give the moral support,
Very well.
your academic and professional background, and any other experience that you think will be useful in your consideration. Please proceed.
Very well. Once again, good morning, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members, and all attendees. First and foremost, I wish to thank the honorable committee through the Chair for convening this vetting session. Secondly, I also wish to acknowledge and thank the Office of the Clerk for their facilitation to this very date. Since we received the news, they have been very instrumental towards making sure that all the documents are submitted in time. So I wish to thank and acknowledge the Office of the Clerk. Thirdly, I also wish to acknowledge and thank His Excellency the President for considering me for this position, and I hope and pray, inshallah, that pursuant to this committee, the committee shall see me fit to serve as the ambassador to Saudi Arabia. So as a brief introduction, my name, as you rightly say, Chair, is Mohammed Ruwange. I am a Digo by tribe. I have grown up in Mombasa. I have grown up in all parts of the country. Just to start with my educational background, I started my primary school in St. Augustine's Primary School, which is in Mombasa. Midway through, I had to travel, or rather I had to move with my father, who was a career civil servant working for the Kenya Cooperative Creameries. So I moved with him to Nakuru, where I completed my education. So I joined a boarding school where I completed my primary school education. Immediately after that, I moved back to Mombasa, where I did my secondary schooling at Alidina Bisram High School. After successfully completing that, I joined Moi University in Eldoret to study law. and alhamdulillah, I was successful in that. And I joined the Kenya School of Law for admission to the Kenyan bar. After that, just before I joined the Kenya School of Law, I started my professional career, my working career. In my second year, I joined the Kenya Commercial Bank as a legal officer. We started as an intern, then slowly by slowly, I gained experience working with the securities department. So I started my professional career at a very, very young age, and I'm thankful for that because it inspired me to see, to appreciate what education needs to be about, which is to better our lives. So after that, I then joined the Kenya School of Law, still working for the bank. Then I joined the State Law Office for my pupillage. I served there for a year plus, and immediately after that, I joined the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, where I was a complaints and investigations officer. Here, I interacted with various aspects on human rights when it comes to, including labor relations, which I know is quite key for this assignment. So I was a desk officer, I was a complaints officer, where we would literally sit in, absorb complaints, investigate them, advise Kenyans on various issues when it comes to economic, social, cultural rights, the fundamental rights and freedoms, and issues like that. After that, I got an interest in the extractive sector. By then, this is when Kenya had discovered oil and gas. So I figured that there was a niche, there was a lacuna that I could carve into. So I decided to engage in the extractives industry. So I started advocating for economic, social, cultural rights when it comes to mining, the extractives, and oil and gas. So I did a lot of work that eventually earned me a scholarship, a prestigious scholarship to the United Kingdom under the Chevening Scholarship Scheme, where I studied my master's in oil and gas. I'm happy to report that I represented the country quite well, because out of at least 3,000 participants, only 6 were chosen, and I was one of them. So I managed to get a secondment from the university to join Centrica Oil and Gas, which is an UK-based oil and gas company dealing with the entire value stream when it comes to oil and gas. So I did my duty there. I worked until 2015, then I came back to Kenya. After my scholarship had expired, after my visa had expired, I came back to serve the nation. On this, I decided now, how then can I implement what I have learned in terms of oil, gas, energy, and the mining sector. I said I think it would be best for me to join academia in terms of trying to, because by then the oil and gas, the energy, the mining sector was quite nascent in terms of the educational aspect or grounding in the country. So I said, let me see what I can do to serve the nation. So I joined Strathmore University as a lecturer, where for the 4th years we introduced an introductory course in oil and gas law, where we were teaching basic issues such as oil and gas licensing, how to get the deal done, and various issues, trying to see how we can harness what we have up north in Turkana towards making sure that the oil and gas academia is improved. Luckily for us, we also, the dean and Strathmore University agreed to us starting a master's degree in oil and gas law. So I'm happy again to report that it is the first postgraduate course in oil and gas in Eastern and Central Africa. So some of us who are pioneers, where I was a lecturer there, we taught the upcoming oil and gas professionals, most of whom are now working for the Talos, for the Ministry of Energy. These are some of the people who came through our hands. So we capacity built them towards making sure that they understand this field in oil and gas. Besides that, I also did a lot of work in terms of research. I was an advisor to the Senate Committee on Energy, where we did a lot of work towards capacity building the Senate when it comes to oil and gas law, oil and gas profession, the value chain, the supply chain, anything and everything that relates to oil and gas. We thought it best to capacity build our legislators towards making sure they know what we're talking about. Besides that, I also took a heavy role in capacity building the judiciary as well when it comes to oil and gas laws. We have to appreciate that in as much as oil and gas is a land law aspect, but it has various nuances that need to be understood. So we also took a huge role partnering with IDLO to capacity build our judiciary on oil and gas related contracts. Besides that, I was also doing my private work. I worked under Savo Oil and Gas Company. Savo Oilfield Service Company is an oilfield service company native to Kenya but serving sub-Saharan Africa, where we were working on contracts, drafting contracts, looking at procurement, seeing how we can get advising clients on how we can deal in the oil and gas sector. After that, besides that, I also had a passion. I have a passion in governance, Honorable Chair and the committee. So I partnered with the Senate, the Mombasa County Senator by then, where I served as his legal and governance advisor. So our work was to literally see how to streamline or to operationalize the office of the senator towards the political or devolution dispensation. So we did a lot of work in terms of governance, in terms of accountability, and things like that. Then, towards at the advent of COVID, we decided the oil and gas industry was coming a bit down. By then, the likes of Tullow were already filing for force majeure simply because the prices were not matching up. So some of our jobs were threatened. So we decided to look elsewhere, and this is when I joined Occidental Oil and Gas Company as a senior contracts engineer. While working for Occidental Oil and Gas Company, I worked on contracts or projects in Qatar, in United Arab Emirates, and in, of course, Oman, where I was based. So over my 5-year span, I've handled a contract portfolio of around 2 to 2.2 billion US dollars. These were my contracts. This was me administering the oil and gas contracts, making sure that everything is done sustainably. And this is what I have been doing, Honorable Chair, until I got the nomination. So, Chair and the Honorable Committee, my grounding, besides being a lawyer, I'm a certified arbitrator, where when you look at commercial aspects, when you look at diplomatic aspects, you need to consider aspects when it comes to arbitration. I'm a lecturer, I'm a teacher, I'm a father, I'm a brother. So over a very short period, I've managed to accumulate adequate experience, and I'm hoping and praying that this honorable committee will see me fit to serve as the Kenyan ambassador to serve. Thank you.
Brilliant. He's probably the youngest nominee that we have vetted, slightly by a year over the bracket of youth. It's quite impressive. I'll allow honorable colleagues to engage you in questions and comments. You just note them down and minimize your responses. Honorable Abdulkadir.
Karibu Nominee, you have an experience in oil industry, both upstream, downstream. Because I see you have even with your last assignment with Oman Oil.
Absolutely. Occidental Petroleum in Oman.
In Oman.
Correct.
So you're working outside the country. Okay. And you know right now we have a crisis for the country because of fuel prices. Once the fuel prices are high, everything is going to be high. How will you bring, or what will you do? Because Saudi is also a major source of oil for our country.
Correct.
What will you do to ensure that the oil you're getting from Saudi, you're going to get maybe lower prices? Or how will you engage the Kenyan government, Saudi government, to ensure that the oil price is stabilized in Kenya?
Really?
Please respond.
Okay, through the chair, thank you, honorable member, for the question. Again, through the chair, the oil and gas, or rather the petroleum agenda has to be thought out, both in the interim and in the long-term agenda. In the interim, we know we have our master framework, which we are famously calling the G2G framework, where we are engaging with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia towards seeing how we can get quote-unquote cheap oil into our country. You see, when you study the framework, it's a concessionary framework where we are getting oil then we are allowed a recovery period of around 6 months, then eventually we pay at a certain rate. So my task, and knowing the industry in the interim, has to be about how to engage those contracts, all right? How to see how we can renegotiate some of these concessionary aspects towards making sure that it doesn't hurt us. Some of these contracts, Honorable Member, are hedged against the United States dollar. So we have to, again, rationalize. We have to do what we call normalization in terms of the percentages. We have to structure the deal in a manner where if the dollar rises or falls, then some of these repayments are adjusted to that effect. So it's a discussion where we have to really interrogate the contract itself and see how we can negotiate it best based on some of the knowledge that we possess towards making sure that we get a better deal for Kenya. So it's something that is doable, and God willing, once we, of course, upon approval by this committee, we shall definitely partner with EPRA and the relevant committees towards making sure that we edge this. Honorable Chair and Honorable Member through the Chair, in the long run, we do need to appreciate that we do have oil and gas resources in our country. So how then, Chair, do we make sure that we attract players in our industry? Since we started this journey, we've had Tallow Oil coming in, partnering with Africa Oil, right? When 2019 came, they filed for force majeure simply because due to COVID, the oil prices were not doing that well. Tallow has come back, but Africa Oil has not come back. You see, these are big time players. But we need to see who is doing the upstream activities in Saudi Arabia, who is not Shell, who is not Saudi Aramco, who is not BP, who is not ExxonMobil. We need to see how we can interest the small-time extractors to come to our fields. And that could mean, Honorable Member, looking at interrogating some of the laws that we have. In Kenya, our licensing regime is what we call the production sharing agreement, but how effective that is towards attracting small-time players is something that we need to interrogate. So in answering your question, we have both an intermediary and a long-term plan that I can participate in.
Honorable Kalabamis and Honorable Kandi, you can have the two at once.
Thank you, Chair. Our nominee, I want to appreciate your enormous experience, education background, especially in legal, fraternity, and oil. And I'm sure Kenyans will be expecting at the time we are grappling with the high fuel cost of fuel, Kenyans will be expecting to gain out of your posting, so that in the near future we have a better deal across the borders. But Kenya, Saudi Arabia is not all about oil. I know you have a lot in background, your CV is impressive, and it's all about oil. But Kenya, Saudi Arabia relationship is not all about oil. We have a serious ongoing problems that emanates from our migrant workers. Some have been tortured, some have been killed, and some have just disappeared in unclear circumstances. Something that we all are grappling. Members of Parliament here, I bet almost every member of Parliament has had a case brought to him by constituents who have had a relative or themselves have experienced these atrocities in Saudi Arabia. They seems not to have been controlled. We seems to be still grappling with it. I just want to know how you are well experienced. On top of your experience in oil, now this is a new field. You have not studied labor migration. So are you well equipped to make sure that this problem is tackled for good? We have a clear migration policy. Countries have surpassed us. We've had a good example of Philippines that is doing so well in diaspora remittance. Ethiopia is now going to overtake us with a lot of migrant workers crossing over. But where is Kenya in all this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the nominee is a young man, but he has a lot of experience in the oil field, a lot. but the job is going to get now, if approved, has to do with more diplomatic plus economic diplomacy. And Saudi Arabia is a ready market for agricultural products from Kenya. What will you do to ensure that we export more of our products? Because we have a lot of products, and I happen to have been there this year, and we saw that there are a lot of opportunities for our products. What will you do as an ambassador from Kenya?
Through the chair, and thank you all members for the question. If I may take the first one in terms of migrant workers, and we are still grappling with the issue. Thank you, Honorable Amisi, for bringing this up. Also as to whether I'm equipped to deal with these matters. As I had stated earlier, Honorable Member, through the chair, I started my legal journey working for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. As a desk officer under the Complaints and Investigations Department, that was primarily my work. Number one is to receive walk-ins who come with issues, be it labor, be it economic, social, cultural rights, be it fundamental principles that have been violated. So in handling some of these issues, Honorable Amisi, through the chair, you have to be first and foremost a listener. You need to understand the legal principles first and foremost towards making sure that you are addressing or you are approaching or attacking this problem effectively. In terms of migrant workers, and this has been a thorny issue, but we have to look at it from a pragmatic perspective. How then do we make sure that we don't have a repeat of these issues? Where, number one, of course, after studying and interacting with the Ministry of Labour, there are measures, there are issues that we can work on towards making sure that everything is done. You see, everything has to be conceptualized in a framework document. So we have to make sure that the bilateral labor agreements that we have an element of enforceability. You see, by the time we sit down with our counterparts in Saudi Arabia and we craft an agenda which addresses the migrant worker issue, that in itself is the discussion in itself is productive in the sense that they need to appreciate where we are or who we are vis-a-vis. We need to appreciate them for who they are as a host country and as an employer. So we need to strengthen our diplomatic ties. They need to appreciate our culture. They need to appreciate our human rights and what we hold dear. And we also need to appreciate them as the employer and the labor rights and the kind of people we are sending to them. So we can codify all this into bilateral agreements, Honorable Amisi, through the chair. And once we do that, then we come up with frameworks towards operationalizing the frameworks that we have, be it digitization, be it opening up the embassy towards accepting or hearing complaints, be it working with our counterparts to address some of these issues. So for me, there is a workable framework. As it stands now, Honorable Member, through the chair, we know that we have around 200,000 workers, Kenyans working in Saudi Arabia. The other day we got a commitment of 350,000 workers, and this was just before Saudi Arabia even got the bid to host the World Cup in 2034. So we want to see how we can sort these issues and make sure that the 350,000 that has been promised is more or less doubled. So we can work through dialogue, through diplomacy, and sort these issues properly. And the aspect has to be enforceability, Chair. How then do we sit with our counterparts and tell them, if this doesn't happen, what needs to happen? That can be done. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. This topic is, like you said, is a thorny issue.
Right.
And that's why I've sought just an intervention. We are not deficient of laws, agreements, bilateral, whatever agreements we have between the two countries. From where you sit, is a problem the culture of Kenyans? Is a problem the destination? Or is a problem our labor policy?
Right.
Because we mostly talk about this issue on a very cosmetic way.
Right.
we have speeches around it,
Right.
but we've never recognized where is really the problem, and that's why we've not solved it.
Right.
So from where you sit,
Right.
where is the problem?
Very good. Thank you, Amisi, for the Honorable Amisi, for the rejoinder. Through the chair, number one, we need to understand that the labor issue is a tripartite aspect, or more or less it's a four-way agenda. We have the employer, Honorable Amisi, on the other end, with a recruiting agency that is based in the host country. And we have the employee who's asking for a job, and the recruiting agency in Kenya. So for you to get a contract, you cannot, especially in the kingdom, you have to apply for these jobs through a recruitment agency. So that's where the problem comes in, number one. We, first and foremost, you see, Honorable Chair, we have to appreciate that for a host to bring in a laborer from Kenya, number one, they have to pay for their visa fees, okay? And number two, they have to pay for the transport cost. So there is a reasonable expectation that they are expecting a competent individual. But the cases that we have received is some of our brothers and sisters are ill-trained. And we have to attack this. We have to face this, as you rightly said. We cannot be cosmetic about this. We have to speak the truth, and we have to attack the truth, even if it hurts. This is the only way that we will improve this problem. So all the recruiters, Honorable Amisi, through the chair, they have to make sure that they are attracting or training competent individuals, because there is a reasonable expectation. By the time I bring in a domestic worker in Saudi, I've already spent around $1,200 US on visa fees and on transport cost. So there is a reasonable expectation, Chair, that I need to get a very competent individual. So we have to look at the recruiters. Who are you bringing into the host country? You have to take the best of the best, because they have agreed to pay, so you have to deliver the best, okay? Number two, we also have to interact with the host country, all right? We have had instances where contractors are confiscated. We have to be honest and open with this, Chair. We've had instances where we hear of cases where phones are confiscated and things like that. I know for a fact that the kingdom is working towards that. How are they doing it? They have decided to digitalize everything online, such that if I'm sitting somewhere in Mombasa, in Kwale, in Lunga Lunga, and I want a job elsewhere, then I'm able to see what terms and conditions I'm walking into. Number one, I need to understand how much salary I'm walking into, how many hours I will be working, when am I coming back home, who will be paying for my fees and things like that. So there's a lot that is being done by us and by them. Number one is digitization. Right now, before you travel abroad, you have to look at your contract. You accept it online, you sign it online, all right? So everything is digitalized and everything is archived. To an extent that if the ambassador is sitting there, then he has a repository. He knows what the Kenyan employee signed up for, okay? So everything, digitalization is sorting that out. Thirdly, Honorable Member, is we as Kenyans need to understand that there are no shortcuts. If my employer, if my host has paid this amount of money for me to go into that country, then I need to honor the contract. It cannot be, we have people we call dalalis in Saudi Arabia, where these dalalis are actually speaking to our people and telling them, you know what, we have better jobs elsewhere. We have other things we can do. So you desert your contract, desert your employer, and I'll give you better terms elsewhere. But you see, you came in with a working visa for this host, all right? So the moment you decide to leave or to vacate your legal employer, then you become vulnerable. Whoever who's taking you on board, Honorable Amisi, cannot protect you. They know you're vulnerable. There's nothing you can do. And this is why we have so many complaints. So we need to understand, as Kenyans, that we need to honor our contract. If you don't want that job, then don't take it. If you take it, then you have to honor the contract. Okay? We have to be honest. We have to be honest. No shortcut.
Thank you.
We have to be honest.
We'll take on the
market and what will we do? We have to look at, Honorable Member through the chair, we have to look at the balance of trade. Right now it's a bit imbalanced. They're giving us oil in petrodollars, we're giving them horticulture. But even the horticulture is not enough, all right? And you know, by visiting the kingdom, you will find that they are selling flowers and say coffee from Europe. And yet when you do your market research, you do your background and your due diligence, all of it is coming from here. So it's creating a markup, getting there at a very high price, and we're being under a short change. So for starters, we need to create awareness. We need to invite our local, and the private sector needs to drive this agenda. They need to showcase what they have in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So there has to be a lot of advocacy. They need to understand what we have. Secondly, Honorable Kandia, we have a huge opportunity when it comes to live animals, all right? The Kingdom was importing a lot of live animals from Sudan, but due to the unfortunate situation in Sudan, the supply chain is a bit cut off. So that is a place, that is an aspect that we can plug in. Thirdly, we also need to look at the barriers to trade, double taxation aspects. We need to look at the entire value chain. Where are we going wrong? So it has to start with information. We have to start with a proper due diligence. Where are we going wrong? Why is it that India and Pakistan are selling avocados and yet we cannot do it? What is the problem? So there has to be a lot of due diligence and information. And with this, we can spearhead this honorable member through the embassy.
Honorable Kana.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to apologize to you, my chair, for coming late, and also the committee. I was attending to a very important matter affecting my constituency. Mr. Mohammed Ruwange, my name is Freddy Kana, Member of Parliament representing the great constituency of Shinyalu. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate you for the nomination. I don't have a question per se, because I don't want to risk asking a question that has been asked by my colleagues before I came in, but I have a comment. Saudi Arabia is known as a labor market for our Kenyans, especially in the domestic space and household, whatever, attendants and that kind of space. I am sure there are other opportunities there. The opportunities beyond domestic workers, the opportunities beyond drivers, etc. Please, if this committee considers you for the appointment, go and open up those space. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Mohammed, for this nomination. It's true. Early this year, I led a delegation to Saudi Arabia, visited the embassy, and my colleagues. And I think the comment you mentioned about the labor issue is absolutely right. But all we want is, if this committee approves, you need to go and address it properly. Otherwise, we will have issues on the same. Because when we visited the embassy, we were actually confronted by domestic workers at the gate of the embassy. And we thought the ambassador was lying to us, but when we asked them, they told us what the ambassador told us, point blank. So, and Kenyans are there in numbers. My colleague, Honorable Kana, talked about others. Actually, others are more than the domestic workers. Kenyans working in Saudi Arabia are more than the domestic workers. Professionals, cadres, they are more than those domestic workers. But Kenyans actually see the issue of domestic workers because they also have problems. They forget that there are other Kenyans working in there. So it's good also to articulate and ensure that more cadres are there. Now, coming to my question. You said, I'm sure you said you speak Arabic.
Yes.
Very good. Because we have had cases whereby people have been sent to countries where they don't speak the language. And there are issues. When we went to Saudi Arabia and we are going into discussions and meetings, the ambassador had to get interpreters. And at some point, the interpreter was told, no, you're not allowed in this meeting. And so the other guys are forced to speak the little English they have.
Okay.
So I'm glad that you speak English. Now, the issue of visa.
Right.
Saudi Arabia allows other countries, especially Europe and Americas,
Right.
that visa is on arrival, or not to residents of Kenya and East Africa. What will you do to convince the Saudi government that Kenyans who want to travel to Saudi will need also to be granted visa on arrival? And remember, the greatest number of people who live here to visit Saudi Arabia are for religious purposes. They go for Umrah, they go for Hajj. And it's a package of its own. So what will you do to ensure that the visa issue is seamless? Well, right now we have issues of agents charging for visas, different categories. Some will charge you per person $250, others will charge you $150, others will charge you $300. There's no standard. That aspect also you need to take care of, the standardization of the visa fees. But above all, how can you convince the Saudi government that we, the people of Kenya, contribute a lot, even to the economy, by visiting the kingdom, especially in Makkah and Medina. Thousands go there every year. So what can you do to ensure that we have visa on arrival?
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair. And through the Chair, let me also acknowledge the comments and the tasks that have been bestowed upon me, inshallah, if we are successful in this process. So to address your question, Honorable Vice Chair, we have to look at it, again, it has to be about dialogue, and it all has to be about diplomacy. We need to understand where they're coming from in terms of why are they, quote unquote, locking us out, and they're making it very restrictive. We have to also appreciate, Honorable Vice Chair, that Saudi Arabia, through, say, Jeddah Airport, receives, through Jeddah, for that matter, receives so many visitors who are coming in for Umrah and Hajj. And in very, very, very many cases, we have what we call stowaways, where people come for Hajj and Umrah and they decide to remain in the country. Saudi now has a population of around 36 plus million. Half of them are the locals, half of them are non-locals, all right? Most are documented, some are non-documented. So we have to appreciate, and I don't want to say that we have to sit and understand where they're coming from, and they also need to understand where we are coming from as well in terms of reciprocity. How then can we open our doors to the kingdom, telling them that, you know what, there is a level of security, we are good people, you know. It's all about cultural diplomacy. How do we make sure that they understand who we are as a people, the fact that we are hardworking, the fact that we are law-abiding, all right? So we have to make sure, we have to address this issue from a very fundamental perspective, that there has to be an element of reciprocity. They also have to appreciate that there's a lot of, now Saudi chair stands as #1 in terms of our trading partner, in terms of our trading bloc. The kingdom has overtaken China. That is in itself a big deal, all right? So we have to throw all these carrots to them and tell them, guys, there has to be an element of reciprocity. And besides that, when you, and Honorable Vice Chair, you will attest to this, by the time you deal with the recruiter, rather the agencies, by the time you're done with the visa process, you're already exhausted. You cannot even encourage any other person to go for Umrah, right? So we have to also encourage our counterparts in the host country, telling them that, you know what, if you make it a bit less stringent, then there's a very high possibility of us traveling to Saudi more and more. So it has to be an open dialogue, Honorable Vice Chair, through the Chair, and we need to understand them, they need to understand us, and we need to put all our cards on the table and tell them that we are open for business.
In 2 minutes, your final remarks.
My final remark, Honorable Chair and the Honorable Members, is to first and foremost thank this committee for again convening this meeting. My humble request is your investment in me, should you choose to consider me for this position, will not be in vain. So all the comments and all the recommendations that have been put forth through the Chair are things that we have documented, and I also wish to acknowledge my wife and a colleague over here. So we need to, there has to be a level of monitoring and evaluation. You remember what Honorable Lamisi said, you remember what the Vice Chair said, how then can we make sure that we implement all those issues. So again, Chair, we are ready to work. We are enthusiastic. and we have ideas. We don't think within the box, we think against the box. So we have to make the dream work. We have to make sure that His Excellency's bottom-up economic transformation agenda is cascaded even in foreign diplomacy. So through the chair and honorable members, I'm ready to work. Thank you.